What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another video. So we are 9 weeks in, and man, what a week it was. One of the better Sundays that I can remember in some time. Out of the 12 games that were played on Sunday, only 2 of which were not one-possession games. It was a crazy day. It was a fun day, but enough talking about how great it was. Let's actually get into it and talk about these games. But before we get into that great Sunday, we have to talk about that awful game we got on Thursday night. We had the Baltimore Ravens heading down to Miami, taking down the Dolphins by a score of 28-6. And really, this game did not go how I thought it would, considering that these were two desperate teams, like I said last week, essentially playing playoff games from this point on, that were both coming off their best game of the season. And this was an awful game because only one team really played like it. And as for that team, the Baltimore Ravens, the return of Lamar Jackson really provided a spark this team hasn't had in some time. You could tell watching the game, the team as a whole, offense and defense alike, really had a jump that they hadn't had all year. And that can be attributed to having their leader Lamar Jackson back. And with gaining a game on everyone last week, with all their division opponents losing last week, the North is more than winnable at this point. Considering Baltimore's schedule going forward here in the next couple of weeks, the North is definitely within reach for them. As for Miami, I feel like a broken record at this point. They've kind of gotten people's hopes up here and there as the year has gone on, but it's for real now. It's over. And the Greer firing was past due, and it was taken care of on Friday. I believe the Mike McDaniel firing still is past due at this point. And really, you got to look at Denver, the team that you beat 70-20 a couple years ago, but that game was the turning point for the worse for you and for the better for Denver. And just look at them. They cut their losses with Russell Wilson. They just ate that money. And now they've found their franchise quarterback, and they are in a really good spot both this year and in the foreseeable future. So you really got to look at what they've done and kind of use that as your model, because I'm sorry, Tua is not the guy. You're not going to win a playoff game, let alone the Super Bowl, with Tua under center. The first step has been taken with the Greer firing, but there's still a lot of decisions to be made in Miami to better the franchise going forward. And moving into Sunday, we had the Chicago Bears taking down the Cincinnati Bengals 47-42. And man, oh man, what an ending it was. This was yet another game of the year contender, and I keep saying that we are spoiled with these this year, so we gotta soak it in. And say what you will about the Cincinnati Bengals, I certainly have my opinions about them, but they make for great television. I don't think that can be up for debate. As for Chicago, you really saved yourselves at the last possible moment from an all-time collapse. You were up 14 at the 2-minute warning, and it took a Colston Loveland miracle to pull out the win here in the last moments. But it wasn't all bad. I will credit Chicago. I loved the play calling in this game. They had a perfect mix of trickery. It felt like for the first time in the Wild, their offense wasn't boring and it wasn't stagnant. It was a good game called by them, a good game played by them. Genuinely a fun watch. It is the Bengals, I will acknowledge that, but purely from Chicago's perspective, I loved what I saw out of them on offense. So take this victory and run with it, because in some ways you're lucky it was Cincinnati that you were playing this week. As for Cincinnati, once again, you are wasting what Joe Flacco is doing for you. Again, he is the exact quarterback that you have needed in Burrow's absence, and you are wasting it. And really, Chase Brown saying to the media after the game that they, quote, need one effing stop is extremely concerning, because that indicates to me and everyone else who watches football that tension is even worse behind closed doors. You even consider Jamar Chase saying it to himself as he's walking into the locker room after the game's over. This team is in a very dicey situation, because getting a wild card spot at this point with who's competing for it in the AFC is nearly impossible. Your only shot is to win the division that right now you are 2.5 games out of. And staying in the 1 o'clock window, we had the Minnesota Vikings traveling to Detroit and taking down the Lions 27-24. And this was quite the upset considering how last year's matchup in the final game of the season in Detroit went. And this has completely thrown a wrench in the NFC North. It's really kind of said a lot of things that we didn't expect to have been said this week. It's really kind of turned the North on its head and everyone's expectations on it. As for Minnesota, JJ McCarthy had a lot of critics and had a lot of bad things said about him, myself included, so I will take responsibility for that. He shut them all up. He played a fantastic game in a hostile environment, and the Vikings winning this game can largely be attributed to him. He was awesome on Sunday. And if this is what the Vikings look like with their guy under center, with KOC's offense having the guy it's designed around under center, the league better look out. The Vikings are dangerous if they can both get good quarterback play and actually get their defense to step up like they did on Sunday. As for Detroit, I'm really not sure you can just chalk it up to injuries at this point. This defense may just be below average to bad. They just made too many mistakes to overcome. And it wasn't the greatest offensive game plan coming off the bye, but the positive spin that you can take away from this if you're a Detroit fan is that this is really the first time in a good while that the Lions have faced true adversity in the regular season. Obviously, they lost in the playoffs last year, but once you lose in the playoffs, obviously you're done. So the loss here, the divisional loss here, it's not really something Detroit is used to, but then again, in the long run, considering this season in the playoff run, it might be good for you. You know how to deal with it when you get knocked down, because like we saw last year, that just really didn't happen that much. And then when the Lions faced a tough Commanders team in the divisional round, they had no response and they ended up losing. Being a game out of your own division as we start November, coming off a divisional loss, if they play their cards right, this could be a good thing for them, but we'll have to wait and see. And staying in the 1 o'clock window, we had the Carolina Panthers pulling off the upset in Lambeau, taking down the Packers 16-13. And this was a very ugly game, but it's probably how the Panthers wanted it to be to pull off the upset, which obviously ended up happening. As for Carolina, a very gutsy win coming off that horrible performance against the Bills last week. This was an amazing win for them. The offensive play calling left a little bit to be desired, but Carolina, again, sound like a broken record here, they probably wanted this game to be ugly. They probably wanted to dominate time of possession. So I can look past it and credit Carolina with a great win here. As for Green Bay, Matt LaFleur, my guy, what are we doing? What was that? And don't get me wrong, Jordan Love had far from his best on Sunday, but his coach did him no favors. The play calling from the Packers was atrocious. Way too many screens, way too many swing passes. They got into the red zone, I think, 4 times, and they only scored a touchdown once, which is like, what are we doing here? And they're also the newest victims of how many Broncos fans like myself have come to know Brandon McMahon miss. Yeah, no, I knew for a fact that last year was a Linsanity run, and it has come to full fruition this year. He just straight up isn't good. He's not what he used to be, and Packers fans are finally discovering that. I don't know. I'm done ranting about Brandon McMahon miss, but really a disappointing loss considering how good you played in Pittsburgh last week and just how similar this game was to the Cleveland loss. So consistency is an issue for the Packers, and it's up to them to dictate and decide if that's going to be an issue going forward. And staying in the 1 o'clock window, I told you it was a busy one. We had a lot of good games. The Denver Broncos took down the Houston Texans 18-15. And as advertised, this was a defensive masterclass on both sides. Points were at a premium. This was a true showcase on how to play defense in the NFL. As for Denver, the fourth quarter magic lives on. Bo Nix really didn't have his best on Sunday, but once again, he balled out in the second half as a whole, and specifically in the fourth quarter when it mattered. And this is the 4th game in the 9 they've played so far where the Denver defense has not allowed a touchdown, which, I mean, like, come on, that's almost half your games you're not even letting your opponent in the end zone. That is an insane rate that they're on right now. We'll have to see if it's sustainable, but impressive nonetheless. As for Houston, this was a very rare matchup where the other defense was on the same level as yours, and the offense just couldn't pull their weight. Obviously, Stroud being knocked out played a big role in that, so I won't trash on them too much here, but again, you're playing a team that has a defense that's on the same level as yours, and you can't really do much as far as moving the ball goes. And they lost another game on the Jags because they won this week, so playoffs are getting more and more out of reach at this point. And these next maybe 2 weeks, it's that desperate in Houston will really decide if this is going to be a playoff team or not. Then, continuing through the 1 o'clock window, we had the Pittsburgh Steelers taking down the Indianapolis Colts 27-20. These are 2 teams that rely heavily on devil magic, and it showed. This game was wacky as all hell. As for Pittsburgh, really, I don't know how I didn't see it, but I really should have figured that this game would be your classic bullshit Steelers win. They were down to their 3rd-string safety, so obviously it was apparent that they would get 6 turnovers and play one of their best games of the year against so far the best offense in the NFL. Staying on the defense, they suddenly remembered how to play football. After getting shredded by the Bengals and Packers, they shut down the best offense in the NFL, which again, we all should have saw coming because It is the Steelers and their patented bullshit. As for Indy, New York Giants, Daniel Jones came out in this one. This is one game out of the 9 that they've played, and I don't think that this will become the norm just based on everything that we've seen out of Daniel Jones and the Colts offense as a whole so far. But what concerns me is that this game told me that Giants Daniel Jones is still in there. The turnovers are still in there. The horrible decisions are still in there. Again, I don't think that this one game out of 9 is an indicator of what we're going to get the rest of the year out of the Colts, but it concerns me that it is still a possibility that it could happen, but we'll have to wait and see. Then moving to the 4 o'clock window, the Jacksonville Jaguars took down the Las Vegas Raiders in overtime 30-29, and this was a game that sucked up until the 4th quarter, and it was another generational 4th quarter plus a little bit of overtime. As for Jacksonville, the offense sucked and the defense was playing great for the first 3 quarters, and then it just flipped. It was completely opposite for the 4th quarter. The inconsistency for Jacksonville is still concerning, but again, it's something that can be corrected. Also, shout out Greg Little, the new record holder for the longest field goal in NFL history at 68 yards. That is impressive. Hats off to the guy. As for Las Vegas, this defense, dude, it's just so bad. They somehow figured out a way to waste Geno, deciding to play actually good football for the first time since week 1. And there's really no salvaging this season with how the rest of your division is playing in the wild card. So I think at this point, really this season is all about figuring out who's going to be on the roster next year and figuring out how you get out of that Geno Smith contract. Oh boy, it is rough. But shout out for going for 2. I mean, I respect not playing for the tie, unlike a certain team from Wisconsin a couple weeks ago. So you have my respect. You definitely have my respect for finally doing something good for once in your franchise's miserable history. Then staying in the 4 o'clock window, we had Chapter 10 of Patrick Mahomes versus Josh Allen. And once again, in the regular season, we had the Buffalo Bills taking this one. And this is just another great classic chapter of these two teams. It was a very close game as per usual. Very fun game as per usual. Both teams making great plays and playing good games all around. As for Buffalo, all of a sudden that now you have to keep pace within your own division that you've owned the past years, you have done just that. You picked up another win here and have kept pace with the Patriots. And Buffalo still has KC's number, again, in the regular season, but a win's a win, so hats off. As for Kansas City, your winning streak that you were on is now over, which in years past hasn't been as catastrophic, but it's definitely a little worse this year because now you're down to 5-4, and I'm really still not sold on the defense. Josh Allen and the Bills as a whole just kind of did whatever they wanted whenever they wanted. Like I said, I really wasn't sold on the defense for how they played against the Raiders and Commanders. Still not so, and we're halfway into the season, so I'm starting to think that maybe the KC defense just really isn't that good. But again, we'll have to wait and see for sure here. Then on Sunday Night Football, we had the Seahawks taking down the Commanders 38-14, and I have my full breakdown here ready, and I had it ready with 10 minutes left in the 3rd quarter because I had seen everything I needed to see. This was a complete and utter beatdown on Sunday Night Football. As for Seattle, I may have to start getting my apologies ready because I did project them to only win 7 games this year. This team is clicking on all cylinders in every facet. They have been getting better and better each week at playing complementary football. The offense driving down, getting a lot of points. The defense holding teams down. Both are playing great games, stringing good games together, and both are helping each other out. As for Washington, you were up against it heading in, but good God, you have to at least put up a fight. You were down 31-7 at halftime. And this is what the Falcons started to look like in like 2020, right before Dan Quinn got canned. And oh boy, Dan Quinn, I hope you're watching this video because genuinely from the bottom of my heart, like you are like one of my mortal enemies now. Why is Jaden Daniels in the game? Your star quarterback who has been dealing with injuries this year. Why is he in the game in the 4th quarter when you are down 38-7. Literally, what good can come out of Jaden Daniels being in the game in that situation? None. The only reason he's in the game is because you're Mr. 28-3 and you believe in pride and ego and getting your ass beat as a team just because in the Super Bowl 9 years ago, you were up 28-3 and the GOAT just decided that you were going to lose the Super Bowl and there was nothing you could do about it. And that will forever be your legacy as a head coach in the NFL. And now Jaden Daniels has to pay the price for that. And now us NFL fans don't get to watch Jaden Daniels until 2026. Commanders fans don't get to watch Jaden Daniels until 2026. And I hope for the sake of the Commanders franchise and Commanders fans that your ass is fired after this season. Okay, the rant's done. Like, Dan Quinn, dude, what are we doing? What are we doing? But again, who would have thought that the Washington Commanders becoming the retirement home over the course of the offseason would not only not work out, but also lead to them being a very injury-riddled team? Who would have thunk? But I think the Commanders, they might be cooked, especially if Mariota's the starter going forward, already 3-6. It might just be it. Might have to pack it in, plan for 26, and reassess your roster over the winter. And moving into our Monday night game, the Cardinals went into Dallas and took down the Cowboys by a score of 27-17. And we really didn't get any of that wacky neither team wants to win stuff I was alluding to in my preview last week. I mean, we got a punt block, got some dropped interceptions, some pretty funny stuff, but nothing really game-altering like I was kind of banking on, so really kind of disappointing in that sense and not the best of games. As for Arizona, the downside of winning this game fairly convincingly is now you have a bit of a quarterback controversy, and despite the 1-2 record, the Cardinals have looked the best they have all season under Jacoby Brissett, for better or worse, and now unfortunately, you kind of have to ask the question of, are you really going to bench the guy who has really got this team going the past couple weeks? The playoffs aren't completely out of reach here, but the 5-game losing streak really did you in here, especially since the Panthers are looking pretty good in the wild card race. Obviously, your division is really tough, so it's not completely impossible, but you've really put yourself in a tough spot despite picking up the win here. As for Dallas, the defense is still horrible. They couldn't even get one stop once the Cowboys offense finally started going, and it was just too little too late at that point because the defense had already gotten shredded, especially in that opening drive out of halftime. That was an absolute clinic by the Cardinals offense, and this defense has really wasted an MVP caliber year out of Dak Prescott and the resurgence of Javonte Williams. He's 6th in the league in rushing, and the Cowboys have only won 3 games. And it's really starting to look like we're going to have our first repeat NFC East champion since 2004, because obviously the Cowboys aren't going to win it. It's looking like the Commanders aren't going to win it either, so it's really the Eagles' division to lose. And again, that hasn't happened in 20 years. It's crazy. And looking ahead to Week 10, first up on Thursday Night Football, we've got the Las Vegas Raiders traveling to Denver to take on the Broncos. And obviously the Broncos are one of the 2 hottest teams in football, riding that 6-game win streak with a golden opportunity to extend that. But obviously we've seen in years past and earlier this year that these Thursday in-division games can tend to get a little wacky. So as per usual, nothing in the NFL is guaranteed, so could be a fun watch just based on that factor alone. Then on Sunday morning, we've got our annual NFL Germany game. We've got the Atlanta Falcons taking on the Indianapolis Colts. And on paper, the Colts really should win this game by a decent amount, but I do think this game could be a bit of a trap game, especially once you consider how Daniel Jones played last week. Maybe the Steelers exposed something, who knows? The Colts could easily win this game by like 20, but I could also see a scenario where the Falcons kind of shock the world here, so it should be a pretty fun watch here. Then moving into the 1 o'clock window, we've got the Jacksonville Jaguars taking on the Houston Texans, and this really could be last call for the Texans, because if they end up losing, dropping the 3 games back at the Jaguars, that may just be too deep of a hole to overcome, and I think both teams kind of know it, so could lead to some pretty fun football, and obviously the status of CJ Stroud's health is going to be a big factor in which direction this game goes and how this game goes. Then staying in the 1 o'clock window, we got the Baltimore Ravens traveling to Minnesota to take on the Vikings. And these are 2 teams that are coming off pretty big wins last week, so it should be pretty fun to see how both teams carry into this week off of that. And it should also be a fun QB duel between JJ McCarthy and Lamar Jackson. Really could be viewed as JJ McCarthy's first big test in terms of going up against the other quarterback, so it should be pretty fun. Then staying in the 1 o'clock window, we've got the game of the week. We've got the New England Patriots traveling down to Tampa to take on the Buccaneers. And this is a real tough test for the other hottest team in football, the Patriots, also riding a 6-game win streak. And same could be said for the Buccaneers, coming off the bye, playing a very quality opponent at home in the Patriots. Then moving to the 4 o'clock window, we've got the Los Angeles Rams traveling to San Francisco to take on the 49ers. And with how competitive the NFC West is this year, this is a huge divisional matchup. Maybe more so for the Rams, considering that the 49ers took the first matchup earlier this season. So getting swept by your division opponent, especially in this division, would be a real tough pill to swallow. So maybe the Rams need this game a little more than the Niners do. And again, I think that's something that both teams kind of know, so it should lead to some pretty fun football here. Then on Sunday Night Football, we've got the Pittsburgh Steelers traveling to Los Angeles to take on the Chargers. I think this game will either be a 17-14 grudge match or a 35-30 shootout, and really no in between. It really depends on which version of both of these teams that we get this year, because obviously we've seen that both of these teams are very streaky, and both of these teams have played very different football games as the year has gone along. So it should be interesting to see for both teams which version we get and which game we end up getting here. Then on Monday Night Football, we've got the Philadelphia Eagles traveling to Green Bay to take on the Packers. And obviously the Eagles are coming off a bye, so it should be pretty fresh. And for the Packers, I think another loss, barring how the rest of the North plays this week, that division could start to slip away for them. Like I said, consistency has been a bit of an issue for the Packers. Welcoming in the Super Bowl champs on primetime is a very tough test. So really the ball is in Green Bay's court to see if they can kind of get back on track or if they're going to start losing grip on this division that they've seemingly had since week 1. So it should be pretty interesting to see here. But that is it for me. As always, if you have any thoughts of your own on this past week, the week ahead, anything that I said again on this past week, the week ahead, feel free to drop them in the comments. If you like what you're seeing, feel free to like and subscribe. It is completely optional, but greatly appreciated. That is it for me. Enjoy week 10, and I'll see you in the next one.